Hello, my name is Swati, and I'll be giving a presentation on the civilized capitalist machine. So, the point of my presentation would be how do decoded flows constitute a deciding machine? That is, and what delusion Guattari imply by the concept of deciding machine is something which is both social and technical. That is, which adapts to the properties of a machine or machinic connections while remaining invested in the socius. So, capitalist desiring machines basically operate on the logic of conjunction. So, this is in contradistinction to the logic or to relations of connection that Delusion Guattari defined as the characteristic trait of the savage territorial machine, and relations of disjunction and inscriptions that were characteristics of the barbarian despotic machine. So, how does this concept of conjunction kind of move away from either connection or disjunction and inscription? So basically, when Delusion Guattari discuss the concept of conjunction of flows, it is about deterritorialization on a large scale, and it involves multiplicity of social processes. So it is a kind of delocalized performance of flows, coming together or overlapping of flows. Uh, basically, if we were to define or if we were to identify the two coordinates of a capitalist conjunction of flows, we'll have to do it in terms of the deterritorialized worker who is kind of free or who is freed from his or her bondage to the land and is free to sell his labor power, and also the decoded flows of money, which is capital, is in a constant mode of circulation and available for investments and reinvestments. With the advent of capitalism, with the advent of capitalism, there is a transformation in the fundamental structure of the socius. So basically, move from an agrarian structure of economy to one that is no longer based on the land or the productive dynamics of the land. So, as I said, we move from an agrarian organization of social relations based on the land to a more radical concept of production, or first of all, and first and foremost, a more radical concept of mobility, because both labor and money are kind of freed from their bondage to the land and are in a state of free circulation. So it's not like this was a kind of a sudden transition. In fact, even in the feudal social model or the agrarian social model, there was the existence of a merchant class, but their influence was maybe minimal. They existed in the interstices of the society, and maybe their influence was limited to pockets. But what happens with the advent of capitalism is that uh, the uh, the predominance of capital, or the primacy of capital, is kind of foregrounded. The merchant and the user, as I said, had existed in the interstices of the old social order, uh, and these merchants or users, they come to play a more critical role when we witness a transition from agrarian to the capitalist mode of production, and they catalyze the process of change. So DNG concludes that capitalism is a diachronic process, something which evolves over a period of time and sees gradual changes in the unfolding of social processes. So capitalism, I think one of the points that they make is capitalism evolves in a state of alliance with other modes of production, and it involves other social processes. of production before moving on to this state of independent production where capital becomes a self-driven mode of production. So basically, if we are to enumerate the characteristics of capitalism, we have to talk about privatization. There is an appropriation of social resources, deterritorialization of assets to transform them into capital, which is readily available for investments. So everything is converted to this state of flows, monetary flows, flows of labor, flows of abstract capital, and there is also a simultaneous devaluation of labor power or the worker in favor of the work or the output, which again is defined in terms of an abstract valuation. So basically, what you witness is a conjunction of multiple social processes. The system is saturated with cynicism. That's another point that Deleuze and Guattari underscore, is because there is a devaluation of life in favor of capital growth or capital expansion, and the extortion of surplus value itself formulated on inhuman grounds within an acquisitive framework of value. So capital saturates the entire socius, exercising tighter and tighter control over the entire dynamics of social production. Capital gradually comes to appropriate the entire socius and its avenues of production. As a quotidian example, we can take the instance of making an investment in the bank or making a deposit in the bank, which is again a kind of investment. And if the common man or the common woman with very minimal access to money makes an investment in the bank to get a surplus in return. So this is how capitalism kind of permeates the entire socius and kind of disseminates its mechanism of operation across the entire body of the socius. Capitalism thus ensures that the lowest denomination in the apparatus is plugged into the system, even if it is in a minimal relation. Commercial or monetary inscriptions of social transactions, which are measured in terms of an abstract quantity. So basically, commercial and monetary inscriptions of social transactions takes place, and everything is measured in terms of an abstract quantification, what D&G refers to as the reign of quantitas. Initially, merchant capital. So how does capitalism evolve into this ubiquitous social phenomenon? Initially, merchant capital undergoes a phase of expansion through relation or in alliance with non-capitalist modes of production in order to appropriate resources and primarily to bulk up and so that it can later play a more critical or dominant role permeating the entire socius. This marks the transition phase from alliance to filiative capital. So I'll just briefly quote D&G in order to explain my point. Capital becomes filiative when money begets money or value as surplus value. Value in process, money in process. So the basic objective is to generate more money, more surplus value. Value suddenly presents itself as an independent substance or an independent criterion of production, something which drives the entire mechanism of production. And in which money and commodity become mere forms which capital kind of assumes or capital kind of appropriates in order to, with the goal or objective of kind of multiplying itself. Money becomes the sole criterion of production, both as something that fuels production or drives production, and also is generated through the process of production in an incremental dynamics. So we have the concepts of original value and surplus value. So capital transforms into this quasi-cause or an indirect cause or a latent cause that inflects all kinds of social production or modes of production and draws them into this logic of marketability. Everything is framed within the parameters of capital-driven production. And another thing, and I think I'll just briefly wrap up with this point since I've covered my 10 minutes. Capitalism proceeds by a differential equation. So money is not a static property but is in a constant state of flux. So D and G give this example of dy by dx, where dy is labor power, which is again fluid and in a state of flux, and it depends on fluctuations of variable capital, the availability of variable capital, and will determine the valuation of labor power. And also capital which is constant, that is also kind of in a state of flux because it is continually seeking to multiply itself. So filiative capital becomes dx, which is the constant capital, plus x, the incremental value. X is the surplus value, which is again in a state of flux because it tries to augment its quantitative value. As capital saturates the system, there might be a curtailment in avenues of production because obviously as it permeates the entire system or process of production, there are fewer avenues of diversification available in terms of production, and therefore there might be a fall in the rate of profit, and money is basically divided into payment money, that is money which is static and used for consumption, and money again the other kind of money is the money that the commercial enterprise kind of uses for investment, which is money which is fluid and is used for financing. So there is a differential axiomatics of abstract quantities where there is always a gap between money as a sedentary concept and money as dynamic in a process of circulation. Capitalism driven by a desire to modify economic chains and generate more credit money, which is futural or speculative, because any kind of investment with an aspiration for profit is speculative in nature and do not concern immediate needs for consumption. This results in a demonetization and dematerialization of money, and I'll end with this quote: "Desire of the most disadvantaged creature will invest with all its strength, and irrespective of any economic understanding or lack of it, the capitalist social field as a whole." Thank you.